So just 10 days ago, Trump's campaign was supposed to crash and burn. And why? The media told us that a joke by an insult comic would destroy any chance of Trump getting Latino voters. They claimed that the comic was a speaker and that of the 8 or so hours at the Madison Square Garden, he was the only one there. Then they waited breathlessly for millions of Latinos to buy their What happened? Well, on Tuesday, President Trump got 46% of Latino voters, the biggest share by a Republican contender in modern times. Hell, even Ricardo Montalban voted for Trump. And he died in 2009. It was, in its purest form, the death of fake news, the collapse of brainwash. For some reason, what usually worked before fell on deaf ears, which makes us wonder, how did this propaganda not work on millions of Americans, even as the media industrial complex orchestrated its typical fury? It was as if the population was vaccinated against a virus, a drug against brainwash. And it worked. Because this time around, the world post-election seems pretty serene. New York City, surprisingly, isn't on fire. The only noise you hear is in the media. Everyone else is getting on with their lives. Seriously, you have to look for the drama online at MSNBC or The View. But how long will this calm last? After minimal self-reflection, even the New York Times is back at it.
Trump will fulfill his promise to be a dictator on day one.
He sends troops into neighborhoods like my own to try to round up undocumented immigrants, that he sets up a network of camps.
Mass deportations. It would likely plunge the United States into something like a recession. His tariffs, likewise, promise to spike prices for most Americans and cause costs to go up dramatically.
That version of Trump could result in abandoning Ukraine to advancing Russian armies, could result in extraordinarily erratic foreign policy in the Middle East.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly.
Donald Trump's not even president yet. Have you seen what's happened in the last 48 hours? The misogynist appoints the first ever woman to be chief of staff. The Taliban announced they want peace with America and to be taken off the terrorist list. Putin came out and said that Western civilization is not an enemy. Mexico has started securing the border in, of course, response to tariff threats. Saudi Arabia is kicking out all of their Hamas leaders. New York is cleaning up their illegal migrant crisis. Xi Jinping came out and said he wants to peacefully coexist with China and said that they respect American people. The European Union chief finally came out and said, hey, America, can we start buying LNG from you so they stop buying from Russian gas? Putin says he takes Donald Trump's plan to end the war with Ukraine very seriously, and Russia supports it. The Houthis are stepping back. The Hamas called for an immediate end to war. He's calling for term limits in from Congress so that way people like Nancy Pelosi stop being forever members. Stock markets and crypto hit all-time highs.
I do think that Europe needs to take more responsibility, but this is probably one of the incentives also to start ending the war or trying to find some kind of a peace settlement. I think the money funnels at the end of the day are going to be a little bit more in a win-win situation because, of course, when the war is over, it's going to be all about reconstruction. And suddenly we're going to start seeing a lot of companies, European, American, and others, who want to come and do the reconstruction of Ukraine. But I do think that Europeans understand that we have to take more responsibility, but we will survive, and we will survive together with the United States.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is calling on his state's Emergency Management Division to investigate what he calls the federal government's targeted discrimination toward Floridians who support Donald Trump. This comes after the Federal Emergency Management Agency confirmed that a supervisor told relief workers responding to Florida after Hurricane Milton to, quote, avoid homes with signs in support of the now president-elect. That person also reportedly put out a memo telling workers to stay together, follow the rules, and practice of de-escalation tactics. FEMA employees told news outlets at least 20 different homes with Trump signs or flags were passed after the storm because of the order. A FEMA spokesperson says the supervisor is no longer working in Florida.
Hurricane relief and FEMA's reaction, right?
Yeah.
And you know, Joe Biden was in charge, but Kamala Harris was running, and there was there was an avoidance of wanting to talk about how significant the impact is on so many communities based on two hurricanes. Now, according to the Daily Wire, this is a staggering story. FEMA officials, so, which should be helping everybody, directed hurricane relief workers in Florida to avoid certain homes that had Trump signs in their lawn. Okay, here's the report according to the Daily Wire. A FEMA supervisor told workers in a message to avoid homes advertising Trump as they canvassed Lake Placid, Florida, to identify residents who could qualify for federal aid. Internal messages viewed by the Daily Wire reveal. The supervisor, Marnie Washington, relayed this message both verbally and in group chat used by the relief team. Multiple government employees told the Daily Wire. So now hurricane relief also politicized.
Talk about revenge porn. I sure hope Joy Reid doesn't go through with that sex tape.
Patootie about it. All I can deduce is that it's the messaging. It didn't get through to people. They're not paying attention. That's all.
You're not paying attention, people. And of course, Democrats always find free speech very inconvenient.
Yes, you're suffering. These things led to that. And I think that the Democratic Party has to really deal with listening to some of the people in the party that is trying to reconnect them to their roots, what they stood for.
I think that's fair, but I think we have to factor in massive disinformation.
We are living in very, very scary times.
A woman has been arrested by Cheshire Police in relation to an inaccurate information on social media.
Today, some other people have been given whopping great big terms in prison for social media posts.
I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online.
Scotland's new hate crime laws have come into force. Some people could be investigated by police if they misgender someone online.
How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year?
I've no idea.
3,300.
Really?
Police will be the source of truth and not social media.
The U.S. is a tough one because, we have the notion of the First Amendment.
There are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda, and whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrent.
If people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block. It's really hard to govern today.
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways.
The First Amendment is not absolute. It does not protect any single thing anyone says. And there are limits, and that's important. And what this committee has been trying to do for the last year and a half is to chill the federal government from monitoring what is going on social media.
And pretend that they know what our founding fathers meant when they drafted the Constitution. I use the word pretend because who the heck would know?
Choices that were made in adopting the Constitution have come to haunt us. Isn't it time to start thinking of a new Constitution?
Founders in 1787, if they came back in 2024, the first thing they would say, I think, is, our system did not work. What happened?
And how do you balance free speech versus crazy stuff that, got people not to take vaccines, for example?
Right. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation.
Musk is sort of trying to pretend sort of freedom of speech is an absolute right. It's never been an absolute right.
Moderation is a propaganda word for censorship.
They want Elon Musk gone, X turned off, and freedom of speech stamped out.
Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandra de Moraes instructed X to crack down on users accused of spreading misinformation. In his decision, Moraes said, quote, X shall refrain from disobeying any court order already issued.
Elon Musk really showing contempt for the government and its approach on this issue. What's your take?
He has absolutely no social conscience. Someone like that should be in jail and the key be thrown away. That bloke should not have a right to be out there on his own ideology platform.
This bloke thinks he's above the law and above common decency. This shouldn't be a matter of the law. It should be a matter of people doing the right thing.
To provide users with corrections to disinformation and misinformation, and Mr. Musk
You obviously don't know what I'm made of.
The privilege of using those words in that way should probably be taken from him.
Because some people in your crowd thought they might have been shadow banned by Facebook. I mean, for God's sakes!
This is the third election in a row in which Russia has tried to interfere, to try to get Trump into the White House.
He's also got a brand new, very, very powerful tool, which is Elon Musk and X. We have Elon Musk talking directly to the Kremlin.
This is a matter of corporate responsibility. Twitter should be held accountable and shut down that site. It is a matter of safety and corporate accountability.
Deep fakes and manipulation of elections. That hurts democracy, and we think this law is sound and will be upheld in the courts.
So we're regularly making sure social media platforms are aware of the latest narratives. You shouldn't be banned from one platform and not others for providing misinformation out there.
Information isn't truth. Most information in the world is junk. Most information is lies and fantasies and fictions. This is why you need institutions like newspapers, like universities, like courts, who specialize in sifting through.
No right given to the people of the United States is absolute, and that includes the right to free speech.
We do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth.
We are not trying to censor speech. We are simply trying to create factually correct information.
To try to correct the facts is to infringe on my right of free speech. Protective measures were taken to take down disinformation about vaccines and about the nature of the virus and about protective measures we could take, including masks. Again, something should be celebrated.
The government is now even relaunching a secretive pandemic-era spy agency to monitor social media.
We need some regulation on social media. That's the bottom line. They haven't done anything in 30 years.
We see this fight against social media platforms doing content moderation, and we see it empowered by Congress and people who are, powerful people, Elon Musk, et cetera. And what does that do? That makes our nation less safe.
I think that we can't be afraid of putting controls on social media in the name of First Amendment free speech.
You're going to pull something off the internet and collude with a social media platform to make sure Americans don't see it. Who determines what's false?
Congressman, we don't do that.
That's not true. If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country. It's as simple as that. If this most fundamental right is allowed to perish, then the rest of our rights and liberties will topple. Just like dominoes, one by one, they'll go down. That's why today I'm announcing my plan to shatter the left-wing censorship regime and to reclaim the right to free speech for all Americans. And reclaim is a very important word in this case because they've taken it away. In recent weeks, bombshell reports have confirmed that a sinister group of deep state bureaucrats, Silicon Valley tyrants, left-wing activists, and depraved corporate news media have been conspiring to manipulate and silence the American people. They have collaborated to suppress vital information on everything from elections to public health. The censorship cartel must be dismantled and destroyed, and it must happen immediately. And here's my plan. First, within hours of my inauguration, I will sign an executive order banning any federal department or agency from colluding with any organization, business, or person to censor, limit, categorize, or impede the lawful speech of American citizens. I will then ban federal money from being used to label domestic speech as mis- or disinformation. And I will begin the process of identifying and firing every federal bureaucrat who has engaged in domestic censorship, directly or indirectly, whether they are the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Health, Human Services, the FBI, the DOJ, no matter who they are. Second, I will order the Department of Justice to investigate all parties involved in the new online censorship regime which is absolutely destructive and terrible, and to aggressively prosecute any and all crimes identified. These include possible violations of federal civil rights law, campaign finance laws, federal election law, securities law, and antitrust laws, the Hatch Act, and a host of other potential criminal, civil, regulatory, and constitutional offenses. To assist in these efforts, I am urging House Republicans to immediately send preservation letters, and we have to do this right now, to the Biden administration, the Biden campaign, and every Silicon Valley tech giant, ordering them not to destroy evidence of censorship. Third, upon my inauguration as president, I will ask Congress to send a bill to my desk revising Section 230 to get big online platforms out of censorship business. From now on, digital platforms should only qualify for immunity protection under Section 230 if they meet high standards of neutrality, transparency, fairness, and non-discrimination. We should require these platforms to increase their efforts to take down unlawful content such as child exploitation and promoting terrorism, while dramatically curtailing their power to arbitrarily restrict lawful speech. Fourth, we need to break up the entire toxic censorship industry that has arisen under the false guise of tackling so-called mis- and disinformation. The federal government should immediately stop funding all nonprofits and academic programs that support this authoritarian project. If any U.S. university is discovered to have engaged in censorship activities or election interferences in the past, such as flagging social media content for removal of blacklisting, those universities should lose federal research dollars and federal student loan support for a period of 5 years and maybe more. We should also enact new laws laying out clear criminal penalties for federal bureaucrats who partner with private entities to do an end run around the Constitution and deprive Americans of their First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights. In other words, deprive them of their vote. And once you lose those elections, and once you lose your borders like we have, you no longer have a country. Furthermore, to confront the problems of major platforms being infiltrated by legions of former deep staters and intelligence officials, there should be a 7-year cooling-off period before any employee of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DNI, DHS, or DOD is allowed to take a job at a company possessing vast quantities of U.S. user data. Fifth, the time has finally come for Congress to pass a digital Bill of Rights. This should include a right to digital due process. In other words, government officials should need a court order to take down online content, not send information requests such as the FBI was sending to Twitter. Furthermore, when users of big online platforms have their content or accounts removed, throttled, shadow banned, or otherwise restricted, no matter what name they use, they should have the right to be informed that it's happening, the right to a specific explanation of the reason why, and the right to a timely appeal. In addition, all users over the age of 18 should have the right to opt out of content moderation and curation entirely and receive an unmanipulated stream of information if they so choose. The fight for free speech is a matter of victory or death for America and for the survival of Western civilization itself. When I am president, this whole rotten system of censorship and information control will be ripped out of the system at large. There won't be anything left. By restoring free speech, we'll begin to reclaim our democracy and save our nation. Thank you, and God bless America.
But there's no one who the Democrats will blame more, of course, for their failure than you, the voter.
What is wrong with America? What is wrong with this country that they would choose a message of divisiveness, of xenophobia, of racism, of misogyny, over a message of inclusiveness, a message for the people, by the people, of the people? That is what the problem is.
Joining me now is Abraham Enriquez, founder and president of Bienvenido US, and Anton Daniels, a YouTuber, content creator. Abraham, let's start with you. The comments about Latino men were beyond outlandish. What was it about the Democrats that Latino men didn't like?
Look, Laura, on Tuesday, 46% of Hispanics went to the polls and voted for protection of the American dream, economic stability, and safety and security. And then we woke up to CNN and MSNBC telling us that we are racist and sexist. I believe that President Trump gaining 46% of the vote, of the Hispanic vote, making him the Republican presidential candidate with the most Hispanic support in history, it's not going to be a surprise anymore. It's going to be the new normal coming to the midterms, because every single attack that mainstream media is giving on Hispanics are like the best ads that we can run during the midterm elections. But look, I think when Kamala Harris did her entire campaign on how President Trump is a threat to democracy, but then realizing that she herself just skipped democracy by skipping a primary and being coordinated the candidate for a party, made a lot of Hispanics who understand the dangers of socialism and communism and how parties in Cuba and Venezuela function that way, realize they need to tilt over to the Republican Party.
No, and of course, remember what they were saying during the campaign. Watch.
I would actually like to put this narrative to bed, maybe forever. One place there's not going to be realignment, black men. You are not seeing shifts among black men. Please stop saying black men.
The only area
supporting Trump.
Yeah. Well, that's what the message. They're not going to vote. They downplayed all of the polls that were showing this shift, and they basically said that was all made up. But they believe the Des Moines Register poll. Anton.
It's incredible. You know, turns out that we cared less about Meg Thee Stallion, Beyonce, and even Usher, and we actually cared about economic stability, wage growth, and then securing the security of our families by making sure that we get out of these proxy wars. Listen, they were so tone deaf, they were so off. We don't care about tampons in boys' bathrooms, and we surely don't care about voting for reproductive rights over the security of our family. And I think that Democrats completely missed the mark by sending Obama out there to disrespect us as a final ploy to get us to the polls and vote for Kamala Harris. And we don't care about Obama or Michelle Obama telling us what to do. We can think for ourselves.
I think that I'd like to reframe the conversation. I think Bernie Sanders is wrong. I think the more relevant question actually is, what is wrong with America? I think what is wrong with our country that the Republican Party would choose as a candidate and support a candidate who is an insurrectionist, who is an election denier, who is someone who is twice impeached, a 34-time convicted felon, someone who has been accused of alleged sexual misconduct by 26 women, found liable for sexual abuse. What is wrong with this country that they would choose a message of divisiveness, of xenophobia, of racism, of misogyny, over a message of inclusiveness, a message for the people, by the people, of the people. That's what the problem is. It's the Republican Party with a bunch of joy and inclusiveness.
No, the message of not being educated, being dumb, and what's wrong with America.
Who said that?
Sonny just did.
What is wrong with America?
My point here is that
that's not what Kamala Harris.
Now, I've said this once and I'll say it again, but 2023 was by far one of the worst years for the Walt Disney Company, arguably the worst performance when it comes down to Bob Iger as the Disney CEO. If you really want to go through this year, they've had quite a number of failures, especially when it comes to Disney Star Wars with the Acolyte ratings disaster, the recent ABC ratings dipping massively, especially impacting those programs like The View, for example, Good Morning America, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and among others. Bob Iger is really not having a good 2024 at all, and not Joy Behar as well. And there's a lot more to talk about when it comes down to Joy Behar and her overall response toward the general public after she got fired from a major studio. There's been a lot of things going on with the Walt Disney Company, HBO, Universal, and among other studios within the Hollywood bubble. And ever since we talked about how Joy Behar got thrown out by HBO, her comedy special Bring Back the Joy got axed, she was fired and removed from HBO entirely, there's no future for her there, as she actually is desperately trying to expand her career, since, by the way, the views ratings are just dipping week by week. She wants to go back to her comedic roots, and for those of you that do not know this, she does have a history of being a stand-up comedian. But what's interesting here has a lot more to do with her overall stance on what happened in recent days. Now, with the Walt Disney Company already dealing with their recent ABC ratings disaster behind the scenes, one major development now has more to do with Joy Behar and what she had to deliver after she was fired and removed from HBO and her comedy special called Bring Back the Joy was axed. This is the very year that Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, is going to attempt to prove himself because he wants to step down by 2026. He wants to leave behind some kind of a legacy. But focusing specifically on many of the Disney talk heads, such as Joy Behar, and in this case for this subject, Whoopi Goldberg, who by the way has been having a very tough time, not just with the Walt Disney Company, but also with many other studios within the Hollywood bubble, within the film industry, if you will, over in Hollywood, and it's not looking good for her right now, and it's most certainly not looking good for her future and what she's trying to do by expanding her career. So one thing that really is truly shocking when it comes down to Whoopi Goldberg is that she is desperately trying to reach beyond The View. She is trying to expand her career into the comedic realm, as well into getting acting gigs and voiceover roles, whether it's movies or television, doesn't matter. She's trying to basically go and separate her ways from The View ever since their ratings have been sharply declining. Now, what's interesting about this has a lot more to do with the fact of Whoopi Goldberg having a very tough time with a specific studio after her recent firing and removal from the studio entirely from various projects. We'll have a lot more to talk about that today. Now, specifically, with Whoopi Goldberg actively dealing with The View's ratings sharply declining since ABC's ratings, in general, have been deeply affected and impacted since September of this year, both Whoopi and Joy Behar have been attempting to expand their careers with different studios, one of which, for Whoopi Goldberg, she was fired from recently. One monumental development going on now involves more to do with Whoopi Goldberg firing overall, and that situation, and how it's beginning to spiral out of control behind the scenes. Now, not too long ago, Whoopi Goldberg was fired and removed from all projects associated with DreamWorks after she was supposed to hold a multi-million-dollar deal with the studio for all new Shrek movies moving forward, starting off with Shrek 5 and the Donkey spin-off film, after they axed her from what was best described to be 3 major motion pictures by DreamWorks, all of which associated with the Shrek franchise. And it turns out DreamWorks doesn't want to take any risks while attempting to resurrect the Shrek franchise after a multi-year hiatus. Now, Goldberg also reportedly played the race card behind the scenes against the studio executives at DreamWorks. Goldberg was also making heavy demands for her character to be redesigned entirely to her liking, which also sparked creative differences behind the scenes. So not only did she have a lot of problems on the financial end of these Shrek movies, she felt like that she was getting underpaid, she felt like that she deserved to be paid more, she also thought that her contract was finalized when it wasn't. You're beginning to see the cracks here becoming more visual, where you have more studios beginning to wake up to the nonsense. But at the very least, DreamWorks doesn't want to deal with Whoopi Goldberg after what happened on The View, after all of the nonsense that she's been spewing. Now, we already talked about how she got fired and removed from those Shrek movies overall, and it just goes to show you how out of touch with reality these people truly are. People like Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Sunny of The View. But as actors, I really don't believe that they have any future in that. I really don't see any kind of leeway for them to get a role at a major motion picture studio. I just don't see it happening at all one bit, especially in 2025, next year. To make matters worse for Whoopi, she is also getting on Disney's bad side, after she was also let go from Toy Story 5. Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, is on the verge of letting her go from The View by sometime next year if the Disney shakeup continues between himself and the board of directors. Now, since the firing at DreamWorks, a major competitor contractor to Disney, ironically, Goldberg has now been making pitches to Universal Studios and attempting to work with them for a new upcoming animated film for her voiceover work, in hopes to expand her career beyond The View, as she is also actively trying to get a studio to create a comedy special for herself on television. ABC is not having a good year, and we all know why. Basically, ever since September, their ratings have been sharply declining week by week, and it's really impacting programs like The View, Good Morning America, Kelly and Mark, Jimmy Kimmel Live, the list goes on and on. Eventually, you're going to have to leave the limelight, you're going to have to leave live television, and it's becoming more and more close to reality. The View's ratings are really not doing too well at all. No major studio wants to deal with her anymore.